So when you think about paying off debt, you probably think of, well, paying it off, right? The usual way. But what if there was another path? Some people are exploring these really unconventional and pretty controversial methods to challenge the whole system. Today, we're going to break down one of those methods, a very specific theory for dealing with banks promoted by Michael Tellinger. Let's dig into how this is all supposed to work. And we have to start right here with this incredibly powerful claim that's at the absolute heart of this whole idea. According to the source, Michael Tellinger, the global banking industry isn't just a little flawed, it's fundamentally a criminal enterprise. And that's not just some throwaway line. It is the core belief that drives every single part of the method we're about to explore. Okay, so to really get our heads around this proposed solution, we first have to understand the problem as Tellinger sees it. And it's a pretty radical view that calls the very foundation of modern banking into question. So what's the core argument here? Well, first, the theory says that banks don't actually lend you money they already have. Nope, they create it out of thin air the moment a loan is issued. Second, and this is a big one, your signature on that loan document transforms it into something called a negotiable instrument, which is basically a valuable asset. When you put those two ideas together, it leads to this belief that the entire system is, in his words, an organized syndicate designed for the enslavement of humanity. So you might be wondering, where did an idea like this even come from? According to Tellinger, the light bulb moment happened during his own court case against a bank. He claims the bank's lawyer admitted something huge, that banks do, in fact, accept payment in the form of promissory notes. For Tellinger, this was like finding the key that could unlock the entire system. So how do you get from that courtroom admission to a practical method? Well, based on that one alleged statement, Tellinger went on to develop a very specific kind of promissory note, one he designed to use the banking system's own rules against itself. And the whole thing really hinges on this one concept, the negotiable instrument. From this perspective, when you put your signature on a document, that signature itself creates value. So the thinking goes, if a bank can create a valuable instrument with some keystrokes, why can't an individual do the exact same thing with a pen? Now, this special promissory note is structured with 4 really key conditions. First, it sets up a tiny monthly payment. Second, it requires the bank to physically come to your house to collect that payment. Third, it gives the bank explicit permission to sell or trade the note. And the fourth condition, this is the real kicker, it says that if the bank does trade the note, the original debt is completely wiped out. And that brings us to the central gamble of the whole theory. The assumption is that a bank, when faced with a choice, either send someone to your door every month to collect a tiny payment or just trade the note on the financial markets for its full value, is always going to choose the easy, profitable option. And by doing that, they trigger the clause that cancels the debt. So that's the theory. But how do you actually put it into practice? Well, the procedure that's laid out is incredibly specific. It's presented almost like a legal ritual that you have to follow absolutely perfectly. And the instructions are meticulous. You have to give your note a unique number. You must sign it in blue ink so the original can't be confused with a copy. Then you have to get that signature officially authenticated at a police station. And here's a crucial part. You can't just hand it to a teller at your local branch. It has to be delivered to the bank's head legal office. And finally, you have to get a stamped copy as proof they got it. Every single step is treated as absolutely essential. Now, you might be thinking this is all just a clever trick to get out of a loan, but according to the source material, this promissory note is part of a much bigger ideological project. It's really a tool that's meant to serve a wider philosophy. And that philosophy is called UBUNTU contributionism. It's described as a blueprint for a whole new kind of society, one that operates completely without money. The idea is to shift away from financial control and build a community where people just contribute based on their passions and talents. So in that context, the promissory note isn't just about clearing a debt. It's framed as a weapon in the fight against the very idea of money itself. So we've got the theory, the step-by-step method, and the big picture philosophy. But the real question is, does it work? Let's look at the results claimed by the source, which is then followed by a very important warning that he issues himself. This is the figure. Michael Tellinger claims that between 2013 and 2014, he used 4 of these self-created promissory notes to pay Standard Bank a total of about 800,000 South African rand. And here's why that claim is so important in his view. He argues that because the bank and its lawyers never took him to court to challenge the notes, their silence was a form of acceptance. He presents this as setting a legal precedent that other people can now point to. But, and this is a huge but, after making such a grand claim, he offers a really stark and critical warning. He stresses that this is not a tool to be used against regular people or small businesses. The method is specifically designed to be used only against banks and government institutions, the players he sees as part of that same financial system. And that kind of brings us to our final thought. Regardless of what you personally make of this method, the fact that it exists and that people are interested in it raises a fascinating question. What does the appeal of radical financial theories like this one really tell us about the level of trust people have in the systems that we've all just sort of taken for granted? Definitely something to think about.